In the previous section, we learned that case law, the body of judicial decisions made by Arizona courts, forms one of the four major sources of real estate law, alongside the Constitution, statutes, and administrative rules. These judicial rulings interpret existing laws and establish legal precedents that guide future cases. However, case law is not permanent or unchangeable. The legal system is designed to evolve, and a court's previous decision may be modified, limited, or entirely overturned when a higher court finds that the earlier ruling was inconsistent with current law, new facts, or principles of justice. This process ensures that Arizona law continues to reflect fairness, accuracy, and societal progress. Understanding legal precedent. To understand how case law may be overturned, we must first understand precedent. When a court issues a decision, that ruling becomes a precedent for future cases involving similar facts or legal issues. In Arizona, lower courts are bound to follow decisions from higher courts under the doctrine of stare decisis, which means to stand by things decided. For example, trial courts must follow decisions from the Arizona Court of Appeals and the Arizona Supreme Court. Precedent promotes consistency and predictability, ensuring that similar cases produce similar outcomes. However, courts also recognize that precedent should not be absolute. When a prior decision is outdated, incorrect, or unjust, higher courts have the power to overturn it. The role of higher courts in overturning case law. In Arizona, the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court play critical roles in shaping and revising case law. When a lower court's decision is appealed, the higher court reviews the case record, legal arguments, and prior precedents to determine whether the law was correctly applied. If the higher court finds that a previous ruling was wrongly decided or no longer aligns with current legal standards, it may overturn that decision. For instance, if the Arizona Court of Appeals interprets a real estate statute one way, but years later, the Arizona Supreme Court determines that the earlier interpretation misapplied legislative intent, the Supreme Court can overturn the previous decision. Once overturned, the new ruling replaces the old one and becomes the controlling precedent for all future similar cases. How case law can be overturned. There are several ways in which case law may be overturned or altered. 1. By a higher court decision. This is the most common method. A higher court, such as the Arizona Supreme Court or even the United States Supreme Court, may review and reverse a lower court's decision. For example, if the Arizona Court of Appeals establishes a legal principle in a real estate case, the Arizona Supreme Court has the authority to overturn it if appealed and accepted for review. Once overturned, all lower courts must follow the new interpretation. 2. By legislative action. The Arizona legislature has the power to pass new statutes that effectively nullify or modify the impact of a court ruling. This can occur when lawmakers disagree with how a court interpreted a law. For example, if a court ruling limits the Arizona Department of Real Estate's authority to regulate certain transactions, the legislature could amend ARS Title 32, Chapter 20, to clarify the agency's powers and effectively override the court's interpretation. Once the new law is enacted, it supersedes the earlier judicial interpretation. 3. By constitutional amendment. In rare cases, case law may be overturned through an amendment to the Arizona Constitution. If a court interprets a constitutional provision in a way that the public or lawmakers disagree with, they can propose an amendment that changes the underlying constitutional language. Once approved by Arizona voters, the amendment effectively overturns the previous judicial interpretation. 4. By a later court decision. Distinguishing the case. Sometimes, a court does not directly overturn a previous decision, but instead limits its application by distinguishing it from current circumstances. This occurs when the court determines that the facts of the earlier case differ significantly from the current one. The court may then issue a new ruling that narrows the earlier precedent, reducing its future influence without fully overruling it. Example in real estate practice. Imagine a case where the Arizona Court of Appeals rules that a seller has no duty to disclose prior termite damage if repairs were completed before the sale. This decision would become precedent and could influence disclosure practices statewide. However, if the Arizona Supreme Court later determines that failure to disclose such damage misleads buyers and violates public policy, it may overturn that decision. The new ruling would establish that sellers and agents must disclose all known material defects, even if repaired, reinforcing the principle first outlined in Hill v. Jones, 1986. This demonstrates how evolving case law keeps real estate standards consistent with consumer protection laws and ethical expectations. The importance of overturning outdated case law. Overturning outdated or incorrect case law is an important part of maintaining justice and public confidence in the legal system. Society, technology, and industry practices constantly evolve, and the courts must ensure that the law remains relevant. In real estate, this evolution might involve electronic contracts, AI-generated marketing, or virtual transactions, issues that did not exist when older cases were decided. By overturning or revising outdated decisions, courts help modernize legal interpretations and protect both licensees and consumers under current conditions. Review summary. In this section, you learn that case law may be overturned through higher court decisions, legislative action, constitutional amendments, or by distinguishing earlier cases. The power to overturn case law ensures that Arizona's legal system remains adaptable, fair, and aligned with contemporary realities. Higher courts, particularly the Arizona Supreme Court, play the leading role in reshaping legal precedent, while the legislature and public can also act through statutory or constitutional change. This process safeguards justice by allowing the law to evolve alongside society and the real estate industry it governs. Discussion prompts with answers 1. What does it mean to overturn case law? Answer. It means that a higher authority, such as a higher court, legislature, or constitutional amendment, reverses or replaces a previous judicial decision. 2. What is the most common way case law is overturned? Answer. By a higher court decision that reverses or modifies an earlier ruling. 3. How can the legislature overturn case law? Answer. By passing a new statute that clarifies or changes the law interpreted in the earlier court ruling. 4. Why might the Arizona Supreme Court choose to overturn a prior decision? Answer. Because it finds the earlier decision inconsistent with current law, social policy, or legislative intent. 5. What is one benefit of allowing case law to be overturned? Answer. It ensures that the law remains fair, current, and reflective of evolving societal and industry standards. Closing remarks. The process of overturning case law demonstrates the flexibility and balance of Arizona's legal system. While consistency and stability are vital, the courts must also correct errors and adapt to new realities. For real estate professionals, understanding that legal interpretations can change reinforces the importance of staying informed about current court rulings, legislative updates, and regulatory changes. The law is not static. It evolves to protect fairness, maintain justice, and uphold the integrity of Arizona's real estate industry. In the next lesson, we will explore how legal precedent is established and applied to real estate disputes, shaping the standards of practice that guide every Arizona licensee.